safe that used a credit card to set the combination.
في هاي الخزنة اللي تستخدم فيها بطاقة الائتمان في عمل الشفرة أو الكود للزبون.
This was a patented, really clever safe where you can take your Visa card, your American Express card, you close the safe door, swipe it, whatever your credit card number is the combination.
يعني هذا ممكن تستخدم أي بطاقة مصدمة سواء إكسبريس، فيزا، ماستر كارد، تحط الخزنة تقفل الباب وشوف الأرقام موجودة على على كرت كمر لما تحطها خلاص الكود بيسوي كود أو رقم شفرة الكود هي رقم باب الخزنة.
Okay, so I had a client who retained me to figure out how to break this safe.
أنا عندي زبون قال لي كيف طريقة فتح باب الخزنة.
Okay, they had 2,000 of these safes at Caesar's Palace Hotel in Las Vegas.
في 2000 خزنة في فندق سيزر في مدينة لاس فيغاس.
They also had them at Disney World in Florida.
وعندهم أيضا في فنادق ديزني وورلد في فلوريدا.
Okay, very, very popular safe, very clever.
خزنة مشهورة يعني مشهورة وذكية.
So the first thing I did, and obviously there's a computer inside the safe to read the card.
عادة تكون لابد يكون كمبيوتر في الخزنة لقراءة هذه البطاقة.
Okay, so the first thing I did, I ordered one of the safes.
أول شيء عملت طلب أحد أنواع الخزنة عندي.
Next, I talked to the manufacturer like I was a normal customer.
وتكلمت مع المصنع كأني أنا زبون عادي.
And I said, okay, how does this work? We're going to use these safes for our police department to store evidence.
احنا لما نستخدم هذا الخزن لوضع الأدلة في مكاتب الشرطة.
That was the scam.
وهذه بس فقط يعني يسمونه يعني تمويل يعني تمويل حق الشركة.
Okay, so I said each officer will store evidence and use their Visa card as the combination.
ويقول لك كل ضابط شرطة شرطي بيحط الخزنة عنده بيستعمل الكريدت كارد يعتبر اللي هو شفرة لباب الخزنة.
What happens if their card is damaged or lost?
شو صار لو بطاقته تلفت أو ضاعت؟
So they said, okay, there's a bypass card that we give to your security director that'll open all the safes.
احنا نعطي بطاقة حق الضابط المسؤول الكبير اللي يقدر يفتح جميع الخزن.
Okay, so I said, okay, send me a safe and it'll come with a bypass card so we can get into all of our safes.
قلت له طرش لي خزنة عينة وطرش لي باي باس كارد البطاقة الرئيسية اللي يقدر فيها يفتح الخزن.
Okay, so I ordered a safe, I got the bypass card.
وصلت الخزنة مع الباي باس كارد البطاقة اللي تفتح.
I waited 3 weeks.
تظل 3 أسابيع.
I called the lady back at their U.S. headquarters. I says, oh, you're not going to believe this. One of our guys lost their card, and we can't find the bypass card. We need a new one.
قلت له يعني اسمحي لي اتصلت للأسف يعني احنا واحد من زملائنا ضيع بطاقة رئيسية باب الكاس وبغينا بطاقة ثانية.
Okay? So she says, no problem. We'll FedEx you a new chip that goes to the safe and a new card.
قال مو مشكلة نطرف لك شيب جديد وبطاقة جديدة اللي توافق مع الخزنة.
Okay, so the next day I get a new EEPROM chip, memory chip for the computer in the safe, and I get a new bypass card.
اليوم الثاني حصلت اللي هو الشيب اللي الخزنة فيه المعلومة مع الباي باس كارد.
So then we put in our computer the old chip and the new chip.
بعدين حطينا في الكمبيوتر مالنا الشيب القديم اللي اخترنا مع الأولي مع الشيب الجديد.
And we take the credit cards. We've got special readers to decode the cards.
بيجيبنا كريدت كارد
Magnetic reader.
لا يجيبنا قارئ بطاقات جهاز اللي يقرأ البطاقات اللي يقرأ يسموه شريط الماجنت.
And we figured out that there was a 24-byte code that was the master code on the card they sent us.
وعرفنا ان 24 رقم الرئيسي اللي يقدر يفتح الخزنة.
We went and found that code in their program by reverse engineering it.
حصلنا ارقام بعكس البرمجه معكسنا البرمجه.
Then we went to Las Vegas and checked into Caesar's Palace Hotel.
وصرنا مدينه لاس فيغاس ودخلنا فنادق سيزر هوتيل.
We took the safe apart with a screwdriver, took the chip out, put it in our computer, and figured out what the master code was for 2,000 safes at Caesar's Palace.
جمعنا باب الخزنه في الفندق، سكننا في الفندق، فكينا الباب، طلعنا الشيب، حطينا في الكمبيوتر وعرفنا الكود مال غرف كلها في الفندق كامل.
Then we typed in that code to our little magnetic card reader encoder.
وطبعنا الارقام على الكارد طبعناه بروحنا.
Made a card, could open any safe in the hotel.
طبعا وخدنا البطاقه وقدرنا نفتح كل يسمونه الخزن في الفندق.
Then we did the same thing at Disney World with an FBI agent.
سوينا نفس الشيء هذه العمليه في فندق اللي في فلوريدا مع عميل من الاف بي اي.
And in 10 minutes, I had a card that would open all the safes at Disney World.
بعد 10 دقائق كان معي بطاقه تفتح جميع خزن موجوده في ديزني وورلد.
When I went and interviewed the inventor of the safe,
لما رحت اسوي مقابله مع المخترع الخزنه هذه.
I didn't tell him what I had done or what I knew.
ما قلت له شو سويت وشو اعرف.
I just said I was doing research and tell me about the security of your safe.
قلت له انا جلس معنا اسوي شيء بحث في التامينات وخبرني شو سويت في خزنتك.
So he explained to me how his safe worked, and I said, but what about the security of the computer and the chip inside your safe, which by the way was not encrypted.
اوكي قلت له فقال لي هو ترجمة التأمينات على الخزنة، فقلت له زين شو العناصر يسمون التأمين و the future of safe and chip.
Yeah, what's the security?
شو التأمين؟ عن التأمين في اللي يسمونه في الشيب والبطاقة. على فكرة ما كانت انكربتد يعني مشفرة.
So the inventor and the head of the factory looks at me and says, "What are you talking about?"
قال لي انت على شو تتكلم؟
What do you mean security? I said, "Well, what's the security of the chip?"
انت شو التأمينات على الشيب؟
And the guy looks at me and says, "Like, are you stupid? It's locked in the safe."
قال المقفولة داخل الخزنة.
When the safe is locked, you can't get to the chip.
قال إذا الخزنة مقفولة ما توصل للشيب.
What they never thought of, and this is typical design problem in all these kind of products, they never thought about somebody checking into the hotel, taking the chip out of the safe while the safe door is open, decoding it, making a card.
ما أخذ على بالهم إن الزبون اللي بيدخل في داخل الغرفة بيفتح باب الخزنة بيظهر الشيب بيسوي كوبي منها بيرده مرة ثانية في باب الخزنة.
So what we do in our work for our clients is to go figure out what they didn't understand about security or their design problem.
دورنا يأتي في مجال شو المشاكل خلل التأمينات اللي هم يسوونها في التصاميم وإيجاد حلول لها.
Another electronic safe. There was 1 million of them in hotel rooms, still is, worldwide, called L-Safe.
L-Safe. We have it here.
Yeah, of course.
يقول L-Safe نوع يقول لك في أيضا في مشكلة ثانية لخزنة يسمونها L-Safe منتشرة عالميا وملايين منها موجودة على الفنادق.
First of all, there's a backdoor code to get into a lot of the L-Safes.
هناك باب خلفي إذا شفرة خلفية قدرت توصل لباب الخزنة هاي.
Okay, so I was contracted to break the L-Safe.
أنا تم التعاقد معاي إني أشد L-Safe.
So this is a safe with an electronic keypad on the front of the door.
هذا عبارة عن خزنة فيها لوحة إلكترونية بالأرقام على الباب.
And some of them have the batteries and the keypad all in one little plastic enclosure that's screwed onto the door.
وفيها البورد نفس البورد مع البطاريات مثبتات البلاغي على الباب.
Some of them, the keypad is a piece of plastic that's glued to the front of the door.
بعضهم الزرار الإلكترونية مثبتة بصمغ على مثبتة بصمغ
Okay. What's in common with a lot of these safes is the control is on the outside of the door and there's a little slot for the ribbon cable to go into the electronics inside the safe.
كل ما يربط فيها عبارة عن في فتحات لدخول الأسلاك الإلكترونية داخل باب الخزنة.
Okay, so this brilliant L safe design with a million of them.
هذا العبقري اللي سوى ملايين من الخزنة هذه.
We figured out how to take a Torx screwdriver, just a standard screwdriver.
قدرنا نفتح وسط مفك عادي.
Unscrew the one screw that held the keypad.
فتحنا جميع البراغي اللي فيها اللوحة الإلكترونية برا.
To expose the slot where the ribbon cable went through the door.
أساس نشوف الفتحات الموجودة وين يسمونها الأسلاك الداخلية الخدوية.
The solenoid that ran the gears to retract the bolt was a little assembly about 4 inches below the slot.
القطعة المركزية تتحكم في القضبان الحديد بالباب الأسنكالون أسفل الفتحة ب4 إنش.
Okay? We figured, and the gears that drove, that the solenoid drove to retract the bolt were exposed.
طبعا والجير اللي هو عبارة عن الحركة الميكانيكية الموجودة انكشفت خاصة يعني عرفت وجودها.
So, we figured out, we unscrew the keypad, go to the office supply store and buy a big paper clip.
Okay.
We bend the paper clip, stick it through the slot, and push the gear teeth,
Okay.
and withdraw the bolt.
كل اللي سويناه صرنا محل قرطاسية خذنا كم ملوك كبيرة كماشة الورق الكبيرة وجينا هناك وعرفنا بس مكان الجير وتم نضغط على الضروس مال الجير عشان نحرك السلوت أو اللسان.
Safe is open, take out the contents, stick the paper clip back in, and lock it again. There's no audit trail, there's no nothing.
بعد ما فتحناه خذنا اللي بغيناه منه ردينا مرة ثانية بالمشبك الورق الكبير ردينا يسمونه بالضروس قفلنا الباب ردينا اللوحة الأمامية كأنه ما في شيء.
And then the geniuses, if you entered the wrong combination 5 times, it would lock out the lock for 30 minutes.
وطبعا الأذكياء سووا لنا الحركة وإذا دخلت رقم 5 مرات بيقفل نص ساعة.
Yeah, but they never thought about radio frequency, energy from a walkie-talkie and what it would do to the microprocessor.
ما فكروا بالموجات ذات الراديو الجهاز اللاسلكي شو بيسوي في البروسيس اللي هو جهاز سيطرة أو الرئيسي.
So we figured out how to take one of our police walkie-talkies, go click, 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 and accelerate the timer from 30 minutes to 10 seconds.
خلنا الموضوع بالوقت هذه لمدة بس يضرب يدق عليه صار من 30 دقيقة إلى 10 ثواني.
That's poor engineering. And then we figured out how to take the same walkie-talkie and go take care of the electronic parking meters to make them never take money again.
وبعد خدنا بعد walkie-talkie والجهاز اللاسلكي في مواقف السيارات والمكان عنده مكان اللي هو بالفلوس وبطريقة معينة دي عرفنا إنه ما يقدر يحسب بذاك على السيارة الباركينج.
So we walk up to a park and go pop, 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 pop. The little green light comes on and never go off. No money needed. Okay, so
as you can see, every single of these examples are different. One, the encryption or the chip inside was decoded to create a card, to open it with a card. The other one was a mechanical bypass with a paper clip. And the other one is a radio frequency to make the lock to do whatever we want. Okay.
شو هي يقول لك كل خزنة لها خاصية ثانية غير عن الثانية تماما بالطرق مو ثابتة. مثلا الأولية عن طريق الكتاب وكيف ترغب فتحها بطريقة البرمجة. الثانية مبرمجة إلكترونية بس فتحها بطريقة ميكانيكية وطريقه ايضا عن طريق اللي هو الرادو اللاسلكيه. يعني كل خزنه مش شرط تكون مقيده بقاعده معينه، كلها كل خزنه لها قاعده غير عنها تماما.
So you really have to think out of the box.
لازم تفكر يكون تفكيرك خارج الصندوق، لانه ما يكون تفكيرك بشيء ضيق. على فكره مثال ذلك انت ما تقول قدام ذلك كثير منكم كان يتوقع بس ايش قبل ما ندخل الدوره هذه. اتكلم عن اخواننا اللي بالمختبر، ها اذا الاثار مو موجود على البنسات يعني ما فتح طبيعي، واذا سمونا كان في اثار خلاص مفتاح مصطنع. صح الكلام ولا غلط؟ زين بعد دوره شو الفكره تغيرت ولا لا؟ لان هذا الموضوع يطلع ما تكون تفكيرك محدود داخل صندوق يا جماعه، او في حجز ضيق. وسع افاقك، وسع تفكيرك على اساس تعرف وين تبدا وكيف تبدا. العالم متغير جدا، امور متغيرات جدا، اشياء جديده، خاصه احنا في مجتمع خليجي قابل يدخلون الناس جنسيات من مئات من كثير من الدول، كل واحد اسلوبه، كل واحد طريقته في كذا، في تعامله في السرقات يختلف من مجتمع لمجتمع اخر. لا تتقيد بمجتمع واحد هذا اسلوب، لا، ولا تقول اذا انت تفكيرك ما يمكنك ان هذا تقول له ما يصير، مو معنى ما يصير، لا يصير، لكنه لو تفكر بشكل افضل تعرف ان هذا الشيء يصير. هذا القصد.
You can't, and as forensic investigators, which is really what you guys are, not the covert entry guys, but as forensic investigators with locks, you always have the problem, how did they get in?
Yeah.
طبعا انتم عندكم المشكله الرئيسيه كمحققين وكفاحصين، لازم تعرفون كيف تمكنوا من الدخول.
So you have to do the same thing we do. We reverse engineer. I'm writing a book right now called Insecurity Engineering.
يقول لازم انتم ايش تكون في تفكير عكسي من الدخول او تفكير عسكري. يقول انا الان قاعد اكتب كتاب تامينات unsecure غير الهندسيه غير مؤمنه، صمم غير مؤمنه.
And what we're doing is explaining to everybody and teaching everybody not so much how the lock was open, but why the lock was open as far as engineering or engineering failures.
Okay. How again? How?
Not how the lock was open, but why the lock was open because of the failure of engineering.
يقول يعني الموضوع ليس كيف فتح، ولكن ليش
كيف فتح وليس
كيف فتح القفل، وشو العيوب الهندسيه اللي فيها، الميكانيكيه الخلل الهندسي او الميكانيكي اللي فيها.
Okay, so first example, this is an electronic safe.
هذا اول مثال، هذا electronic safe.
So we're doing this because most of the people say, well, how you can open an electronic safe? We want to know about electronic safe. And Marc just did a perfect example of two of them. You know, 10 locks. One was broken with including the bypass code, and the other one was with the paper clip. So you have two examples. And this is going to be the third example that you can see.
يقول لك طبعا شرح لكم مارك عن مثالين، طريقتين مختلفين لخزنتين كيف فتحت وهما الكترونيات. واحدة بالطريقة الإلكترونية بالنسخ الإلكتروني بالكتب البطاقة، والثانية بطريقة ميكانيكية إلكترونية، وهذا مثال ثالث.
Okay. So you're looking at a consumer safe, and
This is very popular, made in China. They make lots of these for different companies.
هذه خزنة مصنوعة بالصين كثيرة ومصنعة لكثير من الشركات.
so it's the same question that you guys asked me. How can we open that safe?
السؤال كيف نفتح الخزنة؟
And so you come to a burglary and there's $10,000 missing out of this safe.
في سرقة $10,000 مسروقة من هالخزنة.
Okay, the first thing is there's a bypass lock behind the door panel, if you know it. There's a little piece of plastic that covers a lock.
هنا في قطعة بلاستيكية الجهاز الفني بس وفيها قفل.
Okay, the door, there's a bolt, I think there's 2 bolts, that here and here that secure this door.
في من اسم الباب تطلع من هالاتجاه وهالاتجاه يتحكم بتأمين الباب.
This is actually, other than their little minor problem, this isn't a bad little safe for consumers. They have a little security.
اوكي لهم مشكلة بسيطة في التأمين.
But otherwise, if they would fix their security problem, and the reason we're showing this, there's a lot of these safes so we can do the same thing that are being, I guarantee, are being sold here.
أنا متأكد إن هذه الشيء هاي الخدمة موجودة هنا في مباعلة لكن فيها مشاكل في التأمينات.
Okay, just a minute. If you guys were going to look at this safe,
إذا أنتم تنظرون على الخزنة هذه.
what comes to mind? Okay, you're in a burglary, the safe is locked, the money's gone. Homeowner says, I don't know. There's no forced signs of entry. Nothing's been broken. There's no audit trail on these safes.
And actually what is going to happen with this safe is that the homeowner will not be able to get in.
Yes, and the homeowner won't be able to get in.
Okay, so the
they're locked
whole
up, the
picture will
combination
be
doesn't work.
the homeowner comes to the lock, puts their combination, the lock doesn't open, calls a locksmith or whatever, whoever's gonna work with the safe.
Yeah.
They're gonna destroy the safe open. When they open the safe,
The money's
Okay.
gone.
اوكي يعني لما تصير سرقه لهذا الخزنه في المبلغ مسروق ايا كان طبعا اللي صار بالخزنه طبعا بيكون بيختلف ايش رقم الشفره رقم الكود فيجي صاحب الخزنه بيحاول يفتح الخزنه ما يقدر يفتحها عده مرات يضطر يتصل بالجهه المصنعه او الشركه الوكيل او محل اقفال يفتح له باب الخزنه فبيضطر ان الحاله يكسر له باب الخزنه على اساس يشوف يفتح له الباب ويشوف اللي موجود فيه مسروق.
Okay, so what are you guys, just in 1 minute, what are you guys going to look for in a way to open this safe with no visible sign of entry? And let's assume they didn't know the code to open the safe.
اوكي.
Okay?
انتم الان شو تصوراتكم اذا انتم بتفحصون الخزنه وما فيها اثار تشير فتحه عنوه وما في اثار معينه شو اول شيء خطر بالكم يسمونه؟
Anybody?
We will remove the plastic piece.
This is interior ceiling.
Huh?
This is interior ceiling. From the same board. The guy say سرقة داخلية that's mean interior ceiling that's mean from same people at the company or the house.
Oh yeah, no, okay.
Cheating.
How'd they get into the safe?
There is
كم صار خزنة مش كم كان خزنة.
There is
ده سؤال مهم.
we will remove the plastic piece. The bypass. The bypass.
No, there's no bypass code.
ما في bypass.
Digital machine.
Remove the plastic piece. There is camera we can see.
This doesn't
okay,
come.
let me tell you who did it. It was an 8-year-old kid.
Yeah, an 8-year-old kid got into the safe. They didn't have the code. They didn't take this off like in the example I gave you. This all works properly. There's nothing wrong with this safe.
ما في شيء مشكلة بالخزنة هذه ولا فتحها.
Maybe by fingerprint.
There's
one
no
way.
fingerprint lock.
But he opened the safe. How an 8-year-old
How did an 8-year-old open the safe?
In some cases, the hand lifting up fingerprint like this now.
Oh yeah, okay, that's a different
Using
issue.
UV light or something.
You're not going to get a
هذا
fingerprint
ده
lock.
إيديال.
But that's a good try. That's one of the ways we figure out what the code is on a push-button lock. We put ultraviolet powder on it, and then we look who touched what buttons, and we figure out the code. Okay,
For probability.
Okay, here we go.
okay, we're going to run it now.
Now we're going to show how to bypass the security of this container with a piece of metal that's used for hanging file folders. We're going to take that piece of metal, just like a Slim Jim for opening a car, We're going to insert it at the top of the door. We're going to flip it around and we're going to press the reset button. We're going to reprogram a new combination in the keypad and we're going to open the safe.
Just getting access to a reset button, that is the one that is going to allow to enter the new combination. So that's the new combination. The safe is
Safe is open. This is not what we would call security. This is an excellent example.
في الزر يسوي اللي هو
Okay, so you see the reset button there.
يلغي الرقم كامل، عيد برنامج مرة ثانية داخل، هم وصلوا آلة يعني معدنية إلى هذا الريست، خلاص ألغى كل شيء الأرقام، فأنت حطيت إيش؟ الرقم الجديد مالك وفتحته.
So how you change the combination? You open the safe, press the button, put your combination. That's your new combination.
So you have to use your imagination and think, okay, tell me all the normal ways of opening this safe. You have the combination, but that's the first level of thinking. But how do you create another combination? You have to reset the safe. How do you reset the safe? We have to get to the reset button. That's a shim that we used from the hanging file folders?
Okay.
The little piece of metal that comes out that hangs on your file cabinet?
Okay.
That's what we used.
هذه الآلة اللي استخدموها عبارة عن معدنية تستخدم في حق الفايلات، يعلقون فيها الفايلات في الدراج، الفايلات معلقة، هذا نفس الآلة استخدموها، جلعوا بس القطعة المعدنية من هني، لووها، سووا ريست يقول لك المشكلة شوف أول شيء تفكر كيف يفتح خزنة بشكل طبيعي. بشكل طبيعي إنه عن طريق الكود، إنزين. كيف ألغي الكود أو كيف أعرف الكود؟ وين يلغي الكود وكيف كيف أحط برنامج؟ هاي أمور بسيطة ممكن أسويها. هذا تفكير بسيط جدا.
This is another example also.
Okay, this is a beautiful fingerprint lock made in China.
هذا يدخل فيه دخول China عن طريق بصمة الإيد تفتح الباب مثل القفل.
That was another question today. How you bypass biometric locks?
كيف تطوف عن الباب بصمة.
This is a great example of stupidity.
مثال على الغباء.
Okay, we've run this company out of America. Okay, this is a really nice little fingerprint reader, and this is a bypass lock in the handle, in the lever handle. Okay, now forget about bumping. You can bump this lock, but that's not the issue. Okay, so we looked at this lock, and we figured out we can open it faster with a paper clip than we could with a fingerprint. Because when they designed the interface between the mechanical bypass lock and the bolt actuating mechanism, this is the rule: the key never unlocks the lock.
The key?
The key actuates the mechanism that unlocks the lock, that controls the bolt. Run the video.
This is a demonstration of the BioLock Model 333 fingerprint reader lock. This is a biometric lock import to the United States that's being sold by a number of different companies. Ostensibly is secure. We did not analyze the fingerprint reader or its security or design. However, we did look at the mechanics. This fingerprint lock has a bypass cylinder. It's a dimple lock, and there's a magnetically closed cover to allow access with a key. The lock is packaged quite nicely. The lock can be programmed with one or more master fingers, and those master keys, so to speak, will then be used to authorize individual users. Let's go ahead and demonstrate how this lock works in normal mode, and then we'll demonstrate the insecurity engineering of this lock. The lock is woken up. terminates, blue light comes on indicating an authorized fingerprint, and the lever handle can be turned to withdraw the bolt, and then the system resets as you heard, and now the lock is in its lock state. The bypass cylinder works in the same way. If for some reason the fingerprint reader doesn't work, the problem with this lock design is so elementary that frankly it defies belief. All that is needed to open this lock is a paper clip. The paper clip is inserted into the keyway, the lock is open. And we'll do a macro shot of that, but what you see, frankly, is what you get. This is a macro shot showing exactly how simple this BioLock 333 is to bypass. The keyway is exposed on the bypass cylinder. We simply, and let's first of all show that the lock right now is locked. You can turn the lever, it has no effect on the bolt. We insert the paper clip straight back in the keyway, depressing a pin that engages the latch, and you can see that the lock is open. This is an absolute perfect example of insecurity engineering.
Brilliant. Don't you think? Where, did you jump ahead? Go to,
Okay, what about the fingerprint as a second difference?
okay.
Well, what happened is,
Okay, we did not look at the fingerprint reader, whether we could break that or not, because it didn't matter.
okay, why you want to get so complicated if you can use a paper plate?
Yeah, we don't need to get complicated if we can use a paper.
So,
Without the fingerprints will not be open.
Well,
How do you stop the
So,
fingerprint
I
action?
mean, it's secure.
well, it's not secure because it has a bypass cylinder.
but let's analyze the case for you guys. You have a fingerprint lock installed into a case, into a door. I'm the owner of that lock, and I tell the investigator, okay, how in the hell they got in? That lock doesn't have any audit trail. You cannot pull audits from that lock. But I can tell you is, I have 2 fingers programmed. My finger and Marc Weber, Tobias' finger. The lock has 2 keys, and I got 2 keys. So how they got in? You look at the lock and say, wow, it's a dimple lock. It's not that easy. Bump key, no bump key. Does Marc have all the fingers? Because maybe they chop the finger, you know, to put it on, okay. But it's a fingerprint lock. Maybe how well is the fingerprint or is the cylinder? We can go all the way, and then some guy say, do you try it practically? They say, what are you talking about?
Just for your information, we just evaluated for a client a lock that uses wire that gets heated and retracts in the lock. Okay? They run an electric current through the wire to open the lock. What did we do? We took a hair dryer and we opened the lock by hitting it with hot air to retract the wire. The engineers, who are very bright engineers, they never thought about this. But it's so elementary.
And that's the type of case
Yeah.
that we run into electronic
All the
lock.
time. So everybody's forgotten that electro-mechanical locks, so they have electronic credentials and they have mechanical credentials, they're still mechanical locks. We're going to show you in just a minute a very high-tech electro-mechanical lock that we broke. We fixed it, but we broke it. This is the most popular lock in America. It's a deadbolt. It's made by Kwikset. You have these here called Baldwin. It's the same company. This is a reprogrammable lock. You stick a new key in, go click, click. There's nothing electronic about this lock. This is also very, very defective engineering. The ability to reprogram this lock means it's very defective. We can open this lock, as you'll see, close the lock back up. You may not figure out how we opened it. The key still works. We got in, we got out. Roll.
Let's reprogram the lock.
This is how you rekey the lock. You put in
Working key,
the old key.
finish the smart key, reset tool or learning tool, push it in, remove one key,
Put the new key
the
in.
old one, the lock is
It's now
working.
reprogrammed.
This key works, the old key doesn't work anymore.
There.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, let's just lock the door. We're gonna use,
We take a little tiny piece of blank key
put it into the lock.
that's cut at a certain depth.
We have
Put
this
it in the
screw.
lock. We take a 4-inch screwdriver.
Grab it in. Just help with the torque.
That's the old. That's the old.
Low bias.
Doesn't matter. You take a screwdriver, take a little 6-inch bite.
So
We since did, this is our older video. We since did a newer video. We don't have to do all that. 15 seconds. 4-inch screwdriver. Stick it in
just
the
have to
keyway.
apply tension.
Torque it. We're done. The lock is open. Oh,
And this lock has been compromised.
they sell 20
Now,
to 25 million
Can
of these
this
a year.
plug now be
Okay? Again, you have to look at it because there may be no sign of entry. And this is a very strong lock. It's a deadbolt. They're recognized all over America. Go to the next one. Okay, the next one, yeah, let's talk about this one. Let's go to the RFID lock first, the cop. All right, this is a lock, this is a really, really award-winning, clever electro-mechanical lock from Finland. Okay, they sell a lot of these in Finland. This lock is lots of patents because there's no battery in either the key or the lock, but it's still electronic. How do they do that? How do you have something electronic when there's no batteries?
يعني وين كيف يكون قفل الكتروني يعني ما في بطاريه سواء مصدر للكهرباء الصوت الكفر او المفتاح.
Okay? I call this a clock lock, like a wind-up clock. Okay? So what happens is,
اتصلت انا بمحل ساعات.
what happens is when you stick the key in the lock, there's a little motor inside this lock. When you stick the tip of the key in the lock as it goes in, it pushes a lever that winds up a spring.
يعني دخل مفتاح يصدم برافعه يحرك زنبرك.
And then that spring quickly releases and it spins the motor inside the lock.
وهذا الزنبرك يعمل على ريليز او ازاله على موتور يولد طاقه بسيطه.
That motor is a generator.
هذا الموتور العباره هو اللي يزود الطاقه.
The motor, the electricity that's generated in that split second as the key is going through the lock, charges a capacitor that acts like a battery.
يشحن المكثف اللي يسمونه اللي يشغل القفل.
And then it turns on the microprocessor and it validates the chip in the key.
ويرسل معلومات إلى مفتاح.
Okay? And now, this is all happening in a split second. Now as the key moves through the lock, the motor changes to a regular motor. It mechanically delinks from the first part of the lock. So now, it used to be a generator, and now the motor is a motor. and it spins a gear.
when you put the key out.
And when you push it in.
No, when you push it in.
Yeah, it's a timing. The first, it's like the key moves in different steps until it gets all the way in. The first step charges, the second step validates, and then it moves a
And it
little.
delinks the motor from being a generator to being a motor that turns, if it's valid, if the key is valid, it turns a little gear a couple of degrees.
اوكي يسوي يعني المفتاح دخل يعني كل مرحله المفتاح لها عمليه اول شيء يسوي ريليس على اساس يفتح يسمونه دينامو صغير او اللي يشحن فيها يسمونه البطاريه. الخطوه الثانيه اوريدي شحن فيها يسمونه القفل مع المفتاح. المرحله الثالثه توصل فيها اوريدي رجع الزنبرك مره ثانيه كما كان والموتور.
Okay, so what we did was and then when you pull the key out of the lock, it resets the charging mechanism back to the beginning.
اوكي. لا يسمونه يسحب المفتاح مره ثانيه يسوي يعيده مره ثانيه اول بدايه اصلا من اول جديد.
Okay, so the key, there's a little hook on the tip of the key. That
في مثل سنارة هوك او مخلب في مقدمة المفتاح.
And when you pull the key out, this little hook grabs the lever and resets the whole mechanism.
لما ترد المفتاح يبغى يمسك يسمونه بالميكانيزم مال او ميكانيكية القفل من الداخل ويعيد من اول جديد.
Again, this is a very, very popular lock in Finland, won all kinds of security awards and patents.
طبعا هذا قفل مشهور جدا وخذ يسمونه
So we analyzed this lock to figure out, first of all, exactly how it worked, because it's complicated. Second of all, we broke it down into 4 parts as the process. The charging process, the wake up process, and mechanically how the lock works. And mechanically, when the key is inserted all the way into the lock, after it's validated, it lifts 1 pin to allow the cam to turn. Okay? So the real security of this lock, when you make the electronics go away, is 1 pin. If you lift that pin and the electronics are cleared, it's not as secure as the Egyptian pin tumbler lock we showed you from 4,000 years ago. Okay? So you have to break down the component parts and the functionality. So what we figured out was, if we lock, go ahead.
We figure out 2 attacks. What you're looking at here is the first attack that is done to a key. Okay? And we're going to explain this a little bit more in detail probably with an example. I want to get into that door, okay, which is a restricted area. It has an electronic cylinder, okay. I don't have access to that electronic cylinder, and also that electronic cylinder has an audio trim. So how do I get into that lock?
Okay.
The first thing that I can do is just borrow one of the keys. Let's assume that all of you guys have access to that door except me. So I can choose any of you. As I said always, never lose your keys out of sight.
And don't let us see them.
I can grab one of that key and make just slightly remove some portion of the key of
tiny
the bottom,
bit.
and you can see on red, and give it back to you. Okay? I can do it either you're driving, you give the keys to your valet parking. I can do it that way. You leave your keys inside. I can borrow your keys. Hey, can I open? I need your keys to move your car.
Because you're not worried about us duplicating this key because it's electronic.
Yeah.
So you don't worry about, all the keys mechanically are the same.
Well,
Every one of them is the same mechanically, worldwide.
what is going to happen?
Because it's the electronics we care about.
يعني ميكانيكيا يعني وقت استخدام كذا ما يفاد لان ما تفتح لان يعني اللي تخاف منه اللي هو القضيه الالكترونيه اللي الشفرات او الكود الالكتروني الموجود على المفتاح وعلى القفل. اوكي.
So what happened is every time that we use the red circle key in that lock and that key is removed, the door stays open, the lock stays open.
Because we don't reset the mechanism.
Then after that I can go and open that lock. So I'm just waiting for that person to open that lock and I'm just going behind that person to open.
So what they didn't figure out from the security design standpoint is, and what you guys would need to look at is, what's the critical element in this lock?
ما هو العنصر الاساسي في هذا القفل؟ لان هم شو سووا؟ حفوا شوي بس المفتاح. حتى يسحب المفتاح ما يرد الميكانيكي من اول جديد. يعني هو لما ياخذ المفتاح يسحب شوي منه ها ويعطيك اياه مره ثانيه دخل استغل المفتاح ثاني اياه بس لما سحبه تم القفل مفتوح ما انقفل. حسب من يعقبك يجيب اي مفتاح نفس الشيء يفتح فيه عادي الان.
So if you don't reset the lock, once the key is validated, there's no more electricity for the electronics to do anything. So once you validate the key, it's a mechanical lock only, one pin.
يعني كل المعنى هو القصد الاخير يوصلكم اياها ان مهما كان مفتاح الكتروني وفي الكترونيه في الاخر يكون ميكانيكي.
So we had to figure out, how do you neutralize the electronics, the credential?
نحن توصلنا الى كيف نشيل الالكترونيه نشيل الحركه الالكترونيه.
So if you don't reset the lock, there's no more electronics. So we set the lock either internally with a key, any key, or externally with a little handheld battery-operated Dremel tool. You know what I'm talking about? Dremel? Dremel.
Yeah, it's like a drill, but a high revolution.
Little 35,000 RPM handheld, little tiny tool. It runs little tiny mills, files, grinders, very small, $60.
اوكي.
Like not much bigger than that.
اوكي عباره عن هاي العباره بنسوونها اللي فيها عده ادوات هاي اللي تنفتح هاي اللي فيها مثلا مفك فيها صغير وفيها شاشين وفيها براضها هاي ممكن تستخدمها في حل الباب هذا اذا تعطله شبكه الكترونيه.
So we walk up to the lock and we go and we remove 1/32 inch of material from the inside front of the lock.
That's where you're seeing there.
That's the piece.
The original lever, that's where the
This is
key,
what's inside the lock.
this is what the key will pull out when it's going out.
The little hook on the key.
So the key enters, it hooks, it moves all that piece and then engages on this piece to reset the lock.
So,
If you don't have the hook, you never reset the lock.
so if we walk up to the lock outside and we remove the little piece of material, that lock is waiting for the first guy with a valid key to authenticate the lock and set it. From that point on, any key or a screwdriver will open that lock. And they would never, ever know it. So roll the tape and we'll show you what happens.
We've identified 4 operating
This is a
states
cutaway
for this
macro
lock.
that we did.
And this cutaway is a standard cylinder. It has not been modified to defeat its security. So in the first instance, in stage 1, the key is inserted into the lock. This is what we call a charging and wake-up stage, which includes authentication of the credentials
There's the
of the
access
key.
lever.
The second stage is a function change, which takes the motor from generating current to run the processor to spinning the motor in order to turn a primary gear in order to set the mechanical system so that as the key travels through the keyway, it lifts up a little nylon pin, as can be seen, which actually lifts a metal pin, which allows the cam to turn by the action of the key. So this is stage 3. In stage 4, which we call the mechanical reset, the key is removed
And watch the lever.
and the entire system will mechanically reset back to idle state.
Yeah.
You see the little lever drops? That's the actuating charging lever. And so now this lock is back to its normal locked state. So what we're seeing here is a valid credentialed key with a modified tip.
Notice it
So
didn't
the
reset.
lock is set. It is not mechanically reset so that any key or even a screwdriver can be used to lift that little nylon pin, which lifts the metal locking pin to allow the cam to turn. This is a serious security vulnerability in our view in this cylinder. In this sequence, we're going to demonstrate the external attack on this Ilock cylinder. This attack, we believe, is more serious. It requires a slight modification that can be conducted externally while the lock is mounted in the door to the actuating lever.
Oh, it's the same thing.
Yes. No, the first one that you saw was the tip of the key, so you can mill with it.
For the Dremel tool.
Right here on that door. And that actually creates the same effect. The lock never.
So you would never see an audit trail. You'd have, unless you examined the lock against a known sample, you'd never, ever figure out how they did this.
And also to answer your question and say we want to know about electronic locks, this is a perfect example of a very complicated lock. You know, if we start talking about this lock, I said, what the hell? How many are there? No, there's different cylinders like this, and every cylinder can have a different bypass technique.
في بالنسبه للقوالين الالكترونيه هذا مثال حي عن كارة الكترونيه. تصاميم الكارة الالكترونيه تصاميم مختلفه وكثيره، وكل كارة الكتروني بطريقه مختلفه عن الثاني. هذا الان طريقه. القوالين الالكترونيه يعني معتمده على طريقتين اللي هي الالكترونيه والميكانيكيه. طبعا هالحاله تم شل الحاله الالكترونيه وتم ايش؟ فتح باي اله ممكن فتحها، ولكن هل هذا بيكون مثلا ثابت في كل نوع من القوانين الالكترونيه؟ لا طبعا، لان كل واحد له تصميم خاص فيه في اسلوب الفتح بطريقته.
Excuse me. Can you explain for us the magnetic? How can you pass the magnetic key? The magnetic lock. Sorry.
How can you bypass a magnetic lock? It depends what the lock is.
Yeah, that's why when the key by two sides. There is piece
You mean
of magnetic.
the lock we have here?
لا 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 انت قصدك القفل اللي بحلقه اللي فيها المغناطيس؟
هي اللي بيستخدم فيه مغناطيس، المفتاح المغناطيسي. هي شلون يتجاوز العملية الميكانيكية تبع زي
عادي القفل بحلقه اللي فيها المغناطيس
اللي بيجي فيها ايه؟ المغناطيس من الجهتين.
He asked about this the normal lock which using magnet only to open the lock.
Okay. Some of these locks use solenoids. Some of them have steel pieces in them that you can move. We have very, very strong small magnets. Okay? It depends on how the lock is designed. If they're non-metallic, if they're non-ferrous components, you're not going to open them with magnets. If you have steel pieces that move, then a lot of these, or the strike, the bolt, you can take a very, very strong magnet and you can manipulate those to an open position. There's a really famous hotel lock in America where you could walk up to it and move the magnet, and you can move the bolt. Same thing, there was a safe, I can't remember what it was. Same thing, you could use a very strong magnet to move the internal components. One of the attacks, I don't think I have it in this video, about 2 years ago, involved an aluminum ring with 4 magnets built into it. It was developed by the guys that are coming tomorrow. They actually did it at the beginning with a toilet paper roll with 4 magnets glued to it. Okay? They figured out that on some electronic locks in Europe, there was a ferrous metallic component in the lock that you could spin a magnet around and turn it counterclockwise or clockwise. So this little devil's ring, as they called it, you put around the outside of the lock, spin, 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 the lock is open because of the magnetic field. But again, it depends on the lock. Some electric door strikes, you know, where you push the button, and you can take a very strong magnet, you can walk up to that, you can bypass them and open, and they'll open because you release the little lever. But again, it's it's design dependent. There's no rule for all of it.
The other problem is when we're talking about high-tech locks like stripe locks, you're looking for an answer is give me a tool that is high-tech that I can open all these locks.
It doesn't.
And sometimes you don't need high-tech tools to fit these high-tech locks.
You need to analyze step by step, which is what we do, and document exactly how the lock works and use your mind to say, okay, here's how it works. How do we get to what locks the lock? Forget the key, forget the electronics. What locks the lock? This is a perfect example. This is made by Kaba. This is the 3rd largest lock company in the world. There are thousands and thousands of this lock on military bases, apartments, lots of them. Okay? This is a deadbolt that's RFID based. So the plastic key, it looks like a key, but it's got a chip in it. It's an RFID like a smart card. Okay? You stick it into the lock, it validates it. There's a little solenoid pin that lifts up so the wheel can turn. We'll show you the picture. Okay, the key never unlocks the lock. So how did we unlock this lock? Well, what we had to figure out how to do is lift the solenoid pin out of the way. If we can lift the solenoid pin, because it's the solenoid pin that locks the lock, it's not the key. All the key does is control that pin.
This is the solenoid pin?
Yep.
And this is what it blocks that solenoid pin. So in order to, with the key to move this pin, this solenoid has to move away. Okay, you see that's the open position. Now the cam can turn, you can open the lock.
So, go back and forth. So, there's the lock position, there's the normal idle state. This lock is locked. When the valid key is inserted, that solenoid withdraws. Now this is horizontal shown, but it's actually vertical in the lock. That solenoid pin is moved out of the way of the gate so that that round piece is free to turn with the key. So here's the trick. How do we get to move that little solenoid pin?
Strong magnet, maybe?
No, we tried that. It's not magnetic.
Because it's not a solenoid. Actually, it's a motor.
It's a motor.
The gear.
It's a gear drive motor that withdraws that pin vertically. Okay. So if you can actuate the pin, we don't care what the key does. It doesn't matter. So, show us a picture of the lock, the front of the lock. There you go. Okay, at the bottom of, this is a really nice lock. Really, really, really neat lock. It's got audit trail, it's got everything. And to read this lock, there's a USB port at the bottom of the lock to plug your little cable into. Well, the genius engineers at Kaba forgot about paper clips and shims. So they left enough tolerance for us to stick a little piece of wire next to the USB port and work our way up and push that little solenoid pin up to clear the can. Go ahead and roll the video. This is just like really stupid. There's the lock.
This is the soft lock in sync deadbolt. This is an electronic lock, self-contained, battery operated. It uses a small RFID tag that is inserted like a regular key to unlock the deadbolt. We're gonna now
That's the paper clip on the bottom of the USB port. I'm just using a piece of metal
the water to unlock
and it's
the
covered
deadbolt,
because we just retracted
and we can also lock
that
it
little
back.
lever locking element from the can.
These are all relatively expensive consumer level locks. These aren't $10 locks.
How much is lock?
This is probably $80, $90,
هذا بيقول $98
maybe more.
وغالي مو رخيص بس في امور عيوب فنيه ممكن يعني اذا تفكر بالضغط تعرف كيف ينفتح.
Okay.
هذا الكلام الالكتروني لطريقه مو مثل طريقه الميكانيكا اللي شفتوها الان على يومين فتحها. قوانين او الاطفال الالكترونيه كل شركه لها اسلوب اخر مغاير لان الفكره ما تغير عن الثاني في التصميم الداخلي.
Okay, and this is going to be your expensive hotel lock. Okay,
هذا بيكون قفل فندق غالي.
Navy. It has all the bells and whistle. The car is very secure.
رجل عرب.
That's the big hole, so you can see outside what it is. Okay, the cars are very secure. You have no idea what they got into.
يعني فندق غالي وقفل غالي وفي تأمينات سواء كان للجراج كذا بس ما تعرف كيف دخل.
So I'm on the outside of that door.
أنا برا الغرفة.
And I have a little. It's not exactly, but it's a tool that you can go behind the door. Okay? And you can lift it behind the door. So you might need that this piece is behind the door. It has a little cable that I can sit it inside the lever, pull it, reach the lever, and open the door.
How many of you guys are familiar with this tool?
هذه الطريقة وصلت كيف بهالطريقة؟ عندي آلة صين طويل عادي أدخله من تحت الباب أوصل لين مقبض الباب من الداخل وأحرك المقبض وأفتح الباب.
We use it for cars.
For cars we use.
Yeah, it's a little different.
You can use it for new doors. You know, that's the thing. You guys have to know bypass techniques. Because we can talk about the most secure electro-mechanical lock, or the most secure. You can do that with these models. In the on hotel locks, one of the features is it don't matter if you throw the ball. Most of the time, when you pull the handle, the door opens, retracts the ball, and retracts everything. Another tool that they have is on the big hole. They remove them. When you to have a space on the bottom. They remove it from that peephole. They introduce a tool also to activate the lever from the.
والطريقة الثانية العين السحرية يفتحونها من برا يدخلونها الصين من الداخل يضغطوا عليه الداخل يفتح.
Again, you can have a very high-tech lock, but you can have very low-tech bypassing.
انت ممكن تحصل على تقنية عالية للأطفال لكن
Very low-tech, a very cheap.
ممكن تحصل طريقة رخيصة جدا تفتح اللي هو الهاي تك أو التقنية العالية طريقة رخيصة جدا.
No, I see some faces and say, wow, that was easy. It is easy, you know?
من 6 سنوات صارت سرقة من أحد فنادق الكبيرة عندنا في دبي. مجموعة غرف فندق. مفتاح خاص تصميم خاص بالمفتاح بشكل ممتاز. انتقلت للحادث الفندق اجتمعت مع مدير السكيورتي للفندق ومدح لي الفندق اجراءات التأمينات اللي فيه وقال لي الباب كلف كذا باوند استرليني وهذا الباب قفل انجليزي وهذا غالي وهذا كذا 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 كذا. ويفتح عن طريق البرمجه ويفتح كذا. قلت له اوكي. قلت له كان في دور حوالي يسمونه دور 34. قلت له زين اوكي ممكن تشوف لي في هذا الدور اذا في احد غرف فاضيه فيك الاستقبال قال تفضل كذا غرفه فاضيه. قلت له زين. قلت له هل هذا يعني قال لي غالي ممكن فتحها وهذا ادعاء هذا ما صار عنه شيء. قلت له زين اوكي. مشيت على الطرف من فوق فتحت باب بطرق بسيطه جدا فتحت كلها في اقل من ثانيتين. قلت له أظن كلام مغاير للكلام اللي هاي سكيورتي. ممكن تشرح لي كيف فتحيتهم الآن كلهم؟ قال لي أنا أحتاج تقرير الآن وأنا بسوي تقرير بهذا الخصوص. إذا لم تغير أنظمة تأمينات الأبواب كلها. فمو كل هاي تك يقول لك غالي وكذا يعني مش ممكن فتحها لا كان فتحها بكل بساطة.
شنو يعني
ماشي وصلت قدرت اوصل للسان وضغط على اللسان من برا وفتحت ايده طيب طبعا بسيطه جدا لا مردود هذا
Okay, we want to show you one more really high-tech attack. Go ahead. Okay, guys, everybody pay attention because this is really sophisticated lock. This is one of the best electronic locks, electromechanical locks in the world.
هذا أفضل Electro-Mechanical lock اسمه ASA.
This is probably the best lock company in the world. This key, it's like your car key. It's got a chip in it, and it's got a very good mechanical lock in it.
في نوعين في اللي هو نظام الشيب ونظام الميكانيكية اللي مسوي لي إياها. نظامين.
Okay, and you'll notice when you put the key in, first of all, there's a little smiley face on the liquid crystal display on the chip. So you go to the other side. There's your little smiley face. It smiles at you to show it's got the right combination.
These are chips here.
Yeah, these are the contacts. Okay? There's two electrical contacts on the side of the key. that talk to the lock. There's a battery inside the key. Okay, you guys will really enjoy this.
What is the idea for the battery? To do it?
No, it turns on the, there's a processor, and it turns on the lock. All the electricity comes from the key, okay? This is what the key looks like. There's a processor in the key and a chip. Okay? Okay. So, these locks cost about 600 euro a piece.
هذا ثمن القفل 600 يورو القطعة الواحدة.
Okay, they're used in airports, they're used in banks, they're used in government facilities, they're used in businesses.
هذا يستعمل للبنوك، للمطارات، للمؤسسات الحكومية والمنظمات العالية.
These are really, really good locks.
هذه الكواليتي ممتازة.
Okay, so we figured out, and this is the last generation. This problem that we found has been fixed. This problem that we found has been fixed. Okay?
اوكي. المشكلة شو اللي هم صلحوها في الميكانيكية صلحوها على اساس الموضوع شو المشكلة؟ they are fixed صلحوها.
Okay? So the older locks can still be bypassed. The newer locks, we fixed it.
القفل القديم كان فيه خلل بس القفل الجديد صلحوه خلل.
Okay? So these have lots of options because of the audit, their audit trails, and you can program any number of users, time of day, access control.
هذا تتحكم فيه هذا القفل الجماعة اللي كم تستخدم كم شخص ومن الشخص اللي يستخدم بعد كل شيء بقى تعمل
Okay? Like I said, this is
What is happening? I'll give you the logs right now.
okay. So what happens is you stick the key in the lock, it validates
You
it.
guys go too fast on opening the lock. This has a timing on the lock. The lock has a mechanical part and an electronic part. When you put the key in,
ميكانيكي وجزء إلكتروني.
when you put the key in, the processor inside the cylinder requests the information on the key, authenticates that, and then it turns a motor to unblock a sidebar, and then it can turn. Okay, that is very fast. But if you do it like faster,
It won't work.
I did it faster than the whole process. That key now is not turning. So I saw him just trying to put the key and turn it. It has to wait for the authentication and then it opens.
مفتاح
Okay.
يعني
That's what they call a click. And actually, if you put it,
وقت المعلومات اللي في المفتاح يشتغل.
Okay.
هو بيقول انا دخل الجوال حتى ترى فتح ما فتح هذا ايش؟ لانه ماخذ الوقت الكافي لقراءة المعلومات ما يفتح.
We spent a lot of time evaluating these locks.
يعني اخذنا وقت طويل كنا نقيم هاي النوع من المفاتيح.
What we figured out in the older versions was that we could make these locks open with no electronics.
في النسخة يسمونها القديمة تمكنا من فتح هذه القوالين أو الأقفال عن طريق يعني ميكانيكية بدون إلكترونية.
So how do we do that?
كيف سوينا هذه الطريقة؟
Because there's electronic credentials, but there's still mechanical locks. Every lock, something's got to move to make it work.
ففي إلكتروني وفي ميكانيكي. طبعا الميكانيكي لابد في شيء حركة لازم شيء حركة لازم تحرك الميكانيكا.
These engineers that designed this lock are among the brightest in the world.
المهندس اللي صمم هذا القفل من ألمع المهندسين.
But they never thought about somebody figuring out how to take a very, very, very fine wire and move it through the lock at exactly the right position to actuate the same thing that the electronics actuate.
يعني هو ما ابتكر ان كيف ندخل سلك بسيط الى مكان الرئيسي اللي يقيم الحركه الالكترونيه.
So, again, we figured out the key never unlocks the lock. It actuates the mechanism. In this case, it was a little control mechanism. The sidebar, there's a rotor on a motor. The motor would turn the rotor to allow the lock to be opened mechanically. So if you figure out how to turn the rotor without the key, you don't need the electronics. So,
What's modern? What's
I mean, I wasn't.
okay. So here, we'll do it again. The key net, we're firing our translator tomorrow. So what we figured out is when you stick the normal key in the lock with the electronic credentials, the key validates the credentials and spins a little motor that turns a little rotor that allows the lock mechanically to be open.
يعني داخل المفتاح يشغل الراوتر اللي داخل الدخل اللي يسمح للحركه الميكانيكيه.
It moves a little piece out of the way so mechanically the rotor can lock and open.
من الدخل عشان يسمح الحركه الميكانيكيه.
So what the engineers never ever thought about was the ability through one of the tiny little holes in the lock to stick a very fine wire to turn the rotor directly. What the electronics usually turn with a little tiny motor, we turn with a little wire.
يعني المهندس اللي ما فكر في اطلاقه ابدا اللي هو ممكن ادخال واير من طريق المفتاح والوصول الى الراوتر او هذا لعمل ليشتغل هذا السلك بعمل راوتر اللي يقدر يزيح هذا يسمونه المفتاح فيها.
So every electro-mechanical lock that we've evaluated around the world, we have figured out a way to break.
كل الاطفال والكوالين اللي تشتغل بنظام ميكانيكي الكتروني تمكنا من ايجاد طريقه لفتحها.
Now, what I'll tell you is every lock we've broken, we fixed.
بس كل قفل احنا قدرنا نفتحها احنا وضعنا حلول لها في كيف نغطي هذه الفيو.
So the security vulnerability that we're showing you today no longer, as of today, doesn't exist.
يعني الحين بوريكم الطريقه اللي احنا سويناها الان تم معالجتها واصلاحها حق الاطفال الجديده.
There's new issues that we're working on that we don't talk about.
في نوع جديد قاعد شغالين فيه بس ما مكمل عنه الحين.
Okay, so we're going to show you, this is a key with no battery, no electronics.
هذا المفتاح لا له بطاريه ولا الكترونيه.
The mechanical portion of this key is designed for this lock that we're passing around.
والتصميم المفتاح اصلا سواه حق هذا القفل اللي احنا قاعد نسمعوا عليكم.
But there's no credentials.
No what?
No credentials, no electronics.
اوكي ما في قوة كهربائية أو إلكترونية.
So when we insert this key into this lock,
لما ندخل المفتاح هذا القفل
there's no audit trail.
ما في يسمونه ممكن يتبع من الشخص اللي فتح الباب. أجل خير اللي هو لأن هذا اللي هم سواه على أساس إن أي واحد دخل المفتاح ينعرف من الشخص اللي استخدم المفتاح. بس بالطريقة اللي هم هذا ما يضمن ما في ريكورد اللي أساس يطلع عليه يسمونه يستخدم المفتاح.
You'll never know we were there or when.
ما بيعرفوا إذا كنا هناك موجودين ولا متى.
So the problem with all of these electronic locks that rely on audit trails to identify the user, if we can bypass the electronic credentials you're liable to blame somebody for opening that lock that didn't.
اوكي اذا اعتمدتم انتم على فقط على الركر او التسجيلات اللي تطلع تنطبع من هذا انتم حتكون تلومون كمختبر تلومون الاشخاص اللي فتحوا الابواب فقط، بس ما بتعرفون ان في فتح بطريقه ميكانيكيه ما لها خص بالالكترونيه، ما خص بالايش بالطريقه الالكترونيه اللي يقدر فيها يفتح لها الابواب.
هل هذا يعني من سلبيات يعني؟
من سلبيات الالكترونيات ان ايش ان فتح بطريقه ميكانيكيه طبعا. الالكتروني ممكن اذا فتح الكتروني ممكن يسوي رقم الكتروني.
يعني هذه
الكلام كامل. اذا كان فتح بطريقه ميكانيكيه بحته مفتاح ما في تريس الكتروني عليه.
ناس ما قلت تمسح.
ما في تريس الكتروني، ما في دليل الكتروني على الشخص اللي هذا، بيتم الاشتباه على الناس اللي يستخدمون المفاتيح فقط.
So, you evaluate this lock at the scene of $1 million burglary, and you say, who's the last guy that opened this lock?
أنا لو عندكم مثلا سرقة $1,000,000، آخر سؤال أول سؤال تشرحونه منو آخر شخص استعمل هذا المفتاح أو هذا القفل؟
And you stick your little programming tool into it, and you suck out everything in its brains.
أو وتدخل آلة كمبيوتر داخله وتشفط كل المعلومات اللي فيه.
And then you go get the guy who opened the lock last and say, you're the guy.
You're the guy.
Yes.
Because you got
you're the last guy on the audit trail.
يطلع في السجلات إن آخر شخص فتح، أنت الشخص تعال أنت اللي صرفت الفلوس أنت آخر واحد فتح الباب.
Okay, so, and the manufacturer will tell you, or would have, that if you don't have the right credentials and the right mechanical key, you're not opening this lock.
والمصنع طبعا بيقول لك مباشرة إذا ما عندك المفتاح الصحيح ميكانيكيا ما يفتح الباب، ما ينفتح موليا، يعني لابد من فتح المفتاح اللي عندكم.
And you believe that.
وأنت مصدق الكلام.
Because you don't know any better.
إنك ما تعرف المعلومات.
Okay? And they tell you if the audit trail says that Toby was the last one, Toby's the last one that opened that lock, unless the door is broken or there's some other indication of forced entry.
هيقول طبعا هيقول مثلا على فرض ان توبي هو اللي فتح الباب اخر واحد من المعلومات، اذا استخدم مثلا اساليب ثانيه مؤشرات ثانيه اذا فتح الباب بطريقه اخرى مثل القوه كسر او ما شابه ذلك.
Now, on some of these systems, they're keyed alike systems mechanically. On some of the locks, all of the mechanical portion of the keys are the same.
من الناحيه الميكانيكيه ان تصميم المفاتيح تقريبا مشابهه.
Okay? Because, and these are very secure mechanical locks.
وهذا ميكانيكيا بتامين عالي.
Okay, but they're not worried about the mechanical side because all the security is from the electronic side.
هم مش خايفين من الميكانيكيه لان ضامنين ان التامين كله من الناحيه الالكترونيه.
Okay? So, we take this key with no electronics, it won't open the lock, right?
نحن ندخل هذا المفتاح ما في الكترونيه ما بيفتح الباب ما يفتح القفل.
The mechanical portion is unlocked, but the electronic portion prevents the little sidebar from moving.
احنا ميكانيكيا ما يعمل اي عائق، بس الكترونيا عامل عائق لانه مو مخلي يزيح القطعه صغيره من حركه القفل.
Okay? So, you would all agree that lock is locked?
هل تبقى ان هذا القفل مقفول؟
Yeah. Magic? It's open.
فتح.
Open. Open. Now, okay? Now it's locked. Oh yeah. Now it's locked. No electronics.
هذا مفتاح الكتروني.
Don't you break this.
I will take it to my home. زين. I will open.
Just a minute.
Okay.
Don't break it. They're gonna break it.
No.
Don't, no.
اوكي يصيبني حركة.
Don't turn it.
اوكي.
Okay, so you would agree that that lock's locked,
Yes.
okay?
Okay.
Now it's open. Okay,
I don't like what you do. You leave the wire.
no, I'm not gonna pull it out,
اوكي. عرفت كيف؟
okay?
عندها
Okay, so now we're gonna show you what we did.
Nothing secure.
Nothing's secure.
There is a small
Okay, you guys really have to look.
تحت السلك اللي فيه.
We built this key with a tiny piece of wire.
بس في السلك هذا السلك فصل لك الالكترونيك.
You make the house. You make the house.
No matter. It's a tiny wire that goes up through one hole in the lock. It actuates the lock.
No, it moves. It turns the.
This is the best example of mechanical wire. Because this is
That's why they open the lock.
The new version.
Anybody have any questions?
So that's how you can buy it. Then we go a little bit more in detail.
لا بس هذه لا جديد لا خلاص.
Now, there's other locks.
السين من غير يحطوا لهم
Yeah, we've looked at lots of electromechanical locks because everybody's going in this direction. If they're not designed properly, don't use them. Because like in airports and high-tech facilities, they're using these locks.
صدق من هنا على المطار.
بس لا من السلسلة. حتى أنا حطيت جيت سويت تجربة عملية أنا برا
Master key system.
برنامج المفتاح الرئيسي الماستر كي.
Okay.
على فكرة مكافأة المامية
يا باب العزيز هلا بكره ربع ساعه الاولى ترى يكمل الجماعه. بكره 4 ساعات.
They're not going to break because it's 10 minutes.
10 دقائق يباهم 10 دقائق.
يبغى بالتفسير احنا.
يباه ما عليه خلي 10 دقائق بروحهم. اي على فكرة اليوم 10 ان شاء الله وزعنا لكم خرايط الساعة 8:30. ها؟
أول شيء شهادات إن شاء الله.
شو؟
شهادات أول شيء.
شهادات باكر.
زين حسب نضمن باكر.
باكر تكون جهازات موجودة عندي شهادات.
زين باكر.
في مكتبي.
Unless they want to take a 10-minute break.
هاي بكبرها أنا بعلقها في المكتب.
خليه يقول بس.
Okay. So for 10 minutes, we're going to talk about master key systems. And if you want to get into this again tomorrow morning, that's fine. Master key systems in buildings. They work based on the fact we put extra pin tumblers in the locks. Okay? Toby, let's draw. So, in the normal pin tumbler lock, we have a bottom pin, we have a top pin, we have a spring.
طبعا في المفاتيح اللي هو السلندرز في البستم العالي والبستم النازل او السفلي والزنبرك.
Everybody got that? Everybody understand, right?
كل واحد فاهم هذا.
And we have one shear line.
وعندنا خط فاصل واحد.
Okay? That means when all the bottom pins are at shear line, the lock opens.
لما يكون عندنا الحاجز او لما يكون المسافه السفليه كلها على خط استقامه واحده مع الخط الفاصل ما بين الاسطوانه وجسم القفل.
Okay, so how do we make more than one key open a lock
كيف
with
نسوي
different combinations?
كيف نسوي اقفال مختلفه ينفتح مفتاح واحد.
One more pen.
Okay, we put one more pin between the bottom pin and the top pin.
احنا نضيف يسمونه بستم اضافي ما بين البستم السفلي والبستم العلوي.
Okay? And we do that usually in all 5 or 6 chambers.
نسوي عادة في 7 أو 6 أو 5 أو 7 chambers اللي هو المسارات مال المساتل.
Okay, so here's the short. Draw this in a second here. Right here. We're drawing another. Okay, so this is a normal lock, one key, one lock. Bottom pin, top pin. When you move the bottom pin up the shear line, the plug can turn. Okay?
So this is more or less this, and this is your key. The key has to have this distance, you know, to move it here.
يعني
Everybody see it?
يعني هذا مثال بستم واحد سفلي علوي السفلي لازم يتحرك لين الخط الفاصل. طبعا هذا شكل المفتاح اللي بيه تحت الفاصل لازم يكون في هذا المجال على اساس هذا يوصل لهذا المستوى.
Okay. Now,
ها؟
الأولى ذي.
زين طبعا في بستم طبعا في بستم عالي وبستم سفلي وفي زنبرة. هذا الخط الفاصل حاجز الاسطوانه تلف. اوكي؟ زين هذا اساس انه يتحرك الاسطوانه هذا تتحرك لين هني. طبعا يتحرك لين يعني هذا المفتاح شكل المفتاح يوصل المفروض يكون في هذا المستوى.
what happens
At this point, this pin will only unlock when the pin is raised at this position. There's no other combination either below or above that cut that will open that cylinder.
Okay, so let me translate that. Until this pin, the bottom pin, put a B. Until the bottom pin comes up the shear line by the key, this lock cannot open. Okay?
And it's only one position that can get into the shear.
And put T here for top pin. Now, draw another set of pins with a third pin. Okay, now, go ahead.
اوكي. طبعا في الماستر كي لازم يكون في بن ثالث موجود على اساس ما بين العلوي والسفلي على اساس يكون ماستر كي.
Okay, now we're going to introduce on our one pin lock a master pin. Okay? And let's say, okay. Yeah, okay. So, tell me now how many different keys will open this lock?
Two.
2. And what would those keys be? If pin B, the bottom pin, is moved to shear line,
Or the master.
or pin B plus pin M is moved to shear line. Okay? Okay.
So then we have two cuts. Basically,
So
that's the
now-
same pin.
We can have a key with 2 different values to open this lock. Our master key would have B plus M as a value. Our individual key would only have B. Now, multiply this out by 5 pins.
يعني اضرب هذا في 5 فساد.
Okay? So, if we multiply this out by 5 pins, then the whole trick of master keying and complex levels of master keying is different combinations of B plus M.
يعني معظم خدعة المفتاح الرئيسي عبارة اللي هو العلاقة ما بين البستم السفلي مع بستم اللي هو الماستر كي.
Okay, now in most systems, the master key, all of the keys, and of course all the B's can be different lengths, and all the M's can be different lengths, okay? So each individual key combination have different lengths of B's. You all understand that?
Like a regular key.
Like a regular key, okay? Whatever the combinations, the different combinations of the bottom pins, the B pins are, for the master key, which is a constant value, the M lengths will differ.
اوكي. التركيبة اللي تكون ما بين البستم السفلي او تختلف المتغير الوحيد اللي حيكون اساسي يكون مفتاح واحد الماستر كي شغال المفتاح الرئيسي بيكون طول اللي يسمونه اللي هو البستم الرئيسي الام هو اللي بيتغير اطواله على شكل المفتاح الرئيسي لكن هاي متغيرات يعني كل مفتاح يكون مفتاح بروحه لكن المتغير الوحيد على المفتاح الرئيسي حيكون طول اللي هو ام.
Okay, so let's just say this is the first pin in the lock, in a 5-pin lock, and the value of the master key is an 8. Okay? You with me?
شباب وياه؟ again
Okay.
Let's go here.
Master key.
Let's give it a number. We always use a number for combinations, right? So let's say that this value for the B in this case is going to be 3, and that 3. Okay? And let's say that this is a little bit longer. This big B is 4. Okay? So we can say that a key 3-4 will open the lock.
Yeah.
We always
Okay.
we all agree.
All right?
Now I have a master wafer, okay, that is a complement for that pin, and if I put it on top of that, that pin is gonna increment the value of that pin by 2. So that means the total value of B and M is equal to 6.
So the master key always has a 6 for this first pin. Okay? That's where I was starting. Okay, so let's say this is lock 1, that the individual key, the bottom pin, the individual key has a value of 4. Okay? In order for the master key to also open this lock, we have to add, and the value of the master key is 6. We have to add 2 to this. Okay, this pin plus this pin equals the master value. Okay? So now let's say we have another lock where the bottom pin is a 2. What does the master pin have to be to make up the difference to a 6? It has to be 4. Okay, so here's the deal in 1 minute. When we want to decode a master key system, we can take a change key, the individual key for any lock in the system. And I can start sampling each pin. And because I know the lock, I know the depth increments, the code numbers. Each value of depth. There's 2 keys that are going to open this 1-pin lock. How do I find them? I know because I've got the key to the office, but I'm a bad guy that has an office in this building, and I want to make a master key to go into another office where they store the credit card blanks. But I don't have a key for that office. Okay? So I'm going to take my office lock. I know, let's just say this is a 1-pin lock. I know that this is a value of a number 4 because I got the key. How do I find out what the value of the master pin is for the master key, which is a 6? I have no knowledge of what this second number is. So I'm going to take a series of keys that are cut. Let's just say there's 0, 2, 4, 6, 8 as possible values in that lock. Okay? I'm going to take and I'm going to make a key with a 0 and see if it opens this lock. It's not going to. Because there's only 2 values that are going to open this lock, 4 or 6. Then I'm going to take a 2, I'm going to cut a key to a 2. That's not going to open it. 4, I know will open it because I already got one of those. Yeah. The next one I'm going to cut is a 6. It's going to open that lock. If I cut an 8, it won't open the lock. Okay? So now I know the value of the first pin in that master key system. Now I'm going to take another key, and the first cut I'm going to make a 6. Or I can make it a 4. The next cut, I'm going to go 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. And one of those that's not the office key is going to open it because it's going to be the master key value. When I go through and sample all 5 of those positions, I'm going to know what the master key is for that facility. And you'll never, ever know I did it. There's no evidence. So then, just to finish up, let's say this is a restricted keyway. And I can't get the blanks. So I'm going to simulate blanks out of plastic, or I'm going to mill a blank, or I'm going to take my little easy entry milling machine out of Germany. This is a high security lock. Again, this happens to be Beneco. This is the key that we simulated by this little box that mills. We put this key in, it looks at the profile, it creates a blank key. This is a blank key that we cut for the same combination. This is not a manufacturer's key. This is a key we made, a blank key. Every crime lab that supports covert entry ought to have one of these. That key opens that lock, but that's not the blank that was made by the manufacturer. Okay? I can talk to you offline about the machine, but this is called a little milling machine to make keys. And we can do this with a sample of a key, or we can do it with a picture of that keyway. Put it in Photoshop, put it in the machine, makes the blank. Any questions? No questions?
They want to go.
All right. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning.